It is the off season. However, Dynasty Fantasy Baseball never sleeps. So we are going to cover potential 2022 breakout players. It's time for Dingers.
This is Dingers, way more than fantasy baseball. We keep it real when we talk and knock it straight out the park. Let's see the stats. What's the average draft position? What kind of plays you making? Check the wins above replacement. Check the lineups and the points. This I gotta see. What's your path to victory? Are they aiming for a dynasty? Get points going head to head. Please don't do me no favors. We're always watching waivers. Ain't no minor league. This is major. Yeah, Dingers. Let's go.
Welcome to Dingers, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. It's not just Mike Russo that wins you championships. That's why week in and week out, we're delivering tips and strategies to help you live that straight up OG lifestyle. Tyler Child's joined again by Robbie Baseball from the Murder Room. What's happening, Robbie?
Good to be here, Ty. It has been a while, so long since we recorded. That I am now finding out who I am buying for in the family gift exchange for Christmas. Just found out. I'm not going to say, not that he or she listens, but it's been a while, and Christmas is not at all upon us. Let's nobody turn their lights on until December 1st, please. I have a neighbor who has a tree up. I'm pissed. It's mid-November.
Well, we got a new house, right? In the end of the
Don't
summer.
tell me you put them up when you moved in.
And no, the opposite. So there's a lot more house now. And I was like, put the lights up. I'm like, no, there's too many places for lights.
It took me 2 days to do it last year.
Yeah, a light or just one of those giant snowman I blow up in the front lawn.
Hey, so we've got a widow's peak, which is basically just like, a flat space on the top of one of our roofs, and I can access it. And we put an inflatable Santa up there. So I bought, I think, a 6-foot one, kind of as a joke, like the year that we bought the house in 2018, we were doing construction on it. And I thought that's kind of funny to put it up. And like people, said, oh, that's really cool that you did that, whatever. So we still do it. Last year, when I went to go take it down after, I got it all ready, and the rickety old ladder fell. And it's like a 12-foot drop. And I had to get my wife to come up. And what had happened was it was nailed in, and I kept moving the ladder that was nailed in, which, you don't pry things essentially with nails in it. Otherwise the nails come out. So anyway, it fell out. So it's not even like my wife could just put the ladder back up because it wasn't connected to anything. And it was on a laminate floor. So it would just slide. Great story for the podcast. But anyway, it took about 90 minutes before we were able to jimmy something together so that I could get down safely. And I've since put it on hinges. And I'm looking forward to putting it up, but not until December 1st.
This sounds like a perfect job for a fire pole, though.
Oh my gosh. Down. If we could have a fire pole, we have room to put a slide from our attic to our second floor. My wife refuses. She keeps talking about a spiral staircase. But if you could get a fire pole and a slide, you got the coolest house.
No-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, like Justin Bieber says, baby, it's a no-brainer. Anyway, I haven't been singing a lot lately because we haven't been recording, but everybody at work, same as everywhere else they've been, Ty, they don't care about baseball. One of the guys does call me Robbie Baseball. I appreciate that. Thank you, Dylan. But I've been off work for a couple of days because I mucked my back up 10 days ago and then just worked through it for 5 days until the pain was so crippling that I actually had to stop working. So now I'm resting, recovering, and getting podcast shows ready.
Yeah. Well, and you know what they say is best for back pain?
Oh, boy, do I ever.
A long time ago, someone decided to put stuff in glass bottles. In some of these bottles, they put juice or milk, and that was stupid. Today, only alcohol and a few other products remain in the containers from the gods. It's time for beers and bourbon, because good advice only comes in a bottle.
Are you ready to see this, Ty?
I saw what it was in the little window at the bottom. Oh, Jager bombs.
Oh, yeah. You know what? Jaeger is not the worst.
I don't dislike it either. A lot of
That
people
wasn't
are very
bad.
negative about it, and I quite enjoy it.
I didn't know that was unopened, but I'm gonna. Whoa!
Jason.
I'm gonna follow it up with a beer that just exploded.
Oh man! Did just for listeners that need a good audio quality? Did you see the video I sent you today? That was the Savannah Bananas thing.
No, oh no, minor league baseball. I missed out on a post.
Yeah, but it was just like they hired a couple baseball players. It was a social post, and the catcher rolls in and he's all geared up and he sits down at his desk and he just goes into the crouch and starts typing. Excellent. Just top notch content. I enjoyed it. Anyway, what I have refilled the cabinet. I got Woodford Reserve here. I'm pretty excited about that.
Well, you have been to America since we last recorded, so yeah. What's it like there?
You know what? It was
not that we don't have American listeners, of course.
It was just the way I remember it. They don't care about the rules, and there we are. So I was welcoming of the no rules. To be honest, it was nice and
it's certainly been really restrictive. Even where I work, I'm a chef in a kitchen. I'm wearing a mask to work, and then when I see like students come in and they don't have a mask on, it just boils my blood. And it's only because those are the rules that we are all supposed to abide by. So I just get frustrated thinking you are supposed to be, the future, and you can't just follow where you live. This is a residence.
I've been in the stage for a while now, that I only wear a mask for other people. Right. For me personally, gotcha. I'm done with it. I'm not too worried about it anymore. I'm ready to move on. But to your point, I respect the rules. If somebody has them in place, I'll follow them.
I'm doing it for a paycheck, man. I can't go to the store without it. I put one on, I get out, it's off. We did our thing. We're not trying to be political with it. It's just in Canada, it is very different than the States. My sister lives in Orlando, and I mean, it, according to her, the jokes are, it just never happened here. And it's the don't talk about it. Dad yelled at dinner. We just don't talk about it. So that, that's the thing there. And then for us, I mean, it was back and forth, and I'm back at work now, especially once my actual back feels better, be back at it and go in there and do the thing, right? And then I get to come home just like everybody who's listening to us now and get to do your passion, which is fantasy baseball and parenting. And
let's segue, because speaking of things or places where things don't happen, the offensive stat columns of catchers. Let's get right into that.
We are doing. We'll introduce it. Ty, you can find Ty at Turney Boss on Twitter. You can find the podcast at Dingers Pod, and you can find me at Robbie Baseball 1. We are talking about 2022 breakout candidates. We don't like to guarantee things, but I'm sure the more we consume, the higher the stakes and our confidence will get in the players. So that's why we start with catchers, because we don't care. Sorry, Ty. All right, fire away.
No, it's all good. I mean, this is a position that you can buy really easily. And there's some guys here that are obvious candidates, but there's also a couple that you're not thinking about. And when we talk breakout, we're talking about guys that have shown a little bit of promise and are ready to take that next step at their position. So leading off, Dalton Varshall, that's a guy for me.
Well, you're choking on it. You just start talking catchers and you're choking.
Yeah, I can't even handle it. I almost threw up on my mouth. Just say Dalton Varshall out loud.
Just to promote him.
Yeah. So, I mean, isn't he a center fielder anyway? But, at the end of the day, I mean,
that's
Dalton
why he's on the list, Ty. Multi-position eligibility is a big thing with catchers. Are they actually at another position, but somehow catcher eligible for next year? All right, put him on the board.
I just think for me, Varshall, especially for this season, I think he's going to hit that sophomore window. I think the fastball era is over for him, and I think he's going to be a little bit of an easier out this season. I don't hate him as a late season acquisition for depth. I will say that. Like if you're getting him for a playoff run this year, I could see him being valuable in that late August, September window, but I don't want him before that.
I love that point, Ty. I was going to ask you when we wrapped it up, but since you just brought it up, I'll throw it out there now. A question to you: do you think it's best to invest very little in the catcher? I mean, you can draft a player, get a player and trade, whatever happens, but you're not going to go and seek an efficient catcher until your trade deadline if you're in it. Or do you feel better having kind of a starting catcher to open your season, no matter your league size? We play, our home league is 14 guys, and then we've got the 30 team leagues that we also play in. But for you, do you have a comfort level? Obviously in the 14 teamer, it's very easy to get a starting catcher, but in the bigger leagues, what are your thoughts on that playoff push, or you want to start week 1 with an everyday guy?
I like to hold on to the veterans, the guys that people think are over the hill, right? Like I've talked about it many, many times. Yachty has been my guy for a really long time. But what I really like are older catchers that can hit the off speed. I'm not too worried about 40 home runs or 25 home runs. Like I'll take 15 with 250, and I just know he's going to hit, and I know he's going to get at bats, and I know he's going to generate some runs and RBIs. And so that's the safety net. Now, I will draft, I will hold on to some catchers of the future. And usually I hang my hat on somebody I think is going to be middle of the road. Like I have William Contreras in a lot of leagues right now. So that's a guy that I think is going to be league average when he gets a chance to play. So given that the guy ahead of him is Travis d'Arnaud, fully expect that to be opening day because he'll probably be hurt by then.
Oh, no. There was a signing yesterday. Was it yesterday?
Whatever his name is. Yeah.
Yeah. 2-year, $8 million. So I don't to me, that means trouble for Contreras.
No,
yeah. It's one of the two, right? It's either d'Arnaud's out, or
no, d'Arnaud re-signed too. So it's definitely a trade of Contreras is what's going to happen.
Well, it's just that he re-signed last year. All I'm saying is that it just seems like, to have 3 guys, it seems very silly. We watched Toronto fumble with 3 guys this past year. And then depending on, I gotta say on Twitter, there was some talk today because Jose Barrios re-upped or extended, whatever. And through that, I said, well, it's great that he got the deal done. Like, that's good. But like Toronto already had him coming back in 2022. So like, let's see the additions. And then it got the thread got off topic and started to discuss catchers and who was the catcher of the future. And everybody's like, oh, it's Gabriel Moreno. And I'm like, there isn't a guy I'd rather trade right now that's a catcher than Gabriel Moreno, because he hasn't done it at AAA yet. And everyone's saying he's elite. So you're going to get so much more value from a catcher at this point in time because think of Dalton Varshall as a prospect versus a guy mid-season last year who was really struggling. It took until the second half before he started to play a little better. And then his ceiling is kind of 10 stolen bases, 20 home runs, 280 average, but that's not a catcher. That's not a catcher profile. So I don't think that's reasonable to ask. But Gabriel Moreno, Alejandro Kirk, who is on this list to mention as well. You've got.
Well, and real quick, just because you touched on the trade piece of Kirk, I do think he's the trade candidate in Toronto because of his arm. Like, he gets run on all day. Everything else about Kirk is fantastic. He's a good handler of the ball. He calls a good game. He blocks well. He hits well. But he gets run on all the time. And the Jays have made it very clear with Danny Jansen in-house that they value the defensive side of the game. So I really think it's going to be Kirk that goes. I strongly believe that.
I definitely have had to change my position on Danny Jansen. And it's not that I think he's great or anything, but what I was getting at earlier when I went off on the catcher tangent with Toronto was Danny Jansen was getting a lot of praise from fans. And they're like, did you not see him? Do you not watch the games? I'm like, yeah, like all of the games though, not just like the last 20 when everybody else started watching. Like you gotta like stretch it out a little bit. You gotta remember what happens in April and May and June count. And especially for fantasy, like the steady Eddie catcher is far and away better than the streaky guys you can get to. And that,
I do love the stat that was bouncing around this week. He had like a 951 OPS in the last like
those 10 games or something.
No, it was like 51
was it that
games.
long? Okay.
Well, but of those 51 games, he played like 14 of them. So like, it's not really relevant at all.
So they picked it back. Yeah, they picked it back to the date that worked best. Okay, because I had seen somebody trying to pick numbers for him. So maybe they saw what you saw and threw that in. I'm like, oh, see, this is why I hate getting these conversations about Toronto, because when you
for that though.
Well, when you get the fans talking about like who's best, and of course, like for me, for you, for a lot of the people listening, we just immediately convert it to fantasy. Well, the player isn't good if they're not good for fantasy purposes. Obviously, defensive metrics for your favorite team and MLB baseball games count where they don't in fantasy. But you have to keep in mind that if the guy isn't going to be able to get it done in some categories, they're not going to help you. Someone that I think could tie next year to get us back on topic. My fault. I know we talked about going short, and now look at this. Second guy on the list, Jorge Alfaro with Miami in 295 at-bats last year. No power, 4 dingers. Runs and RBIs were both 30 or lower, 22 for the runs, but 8 stolen bases. Like weird. And a 244 average, which from a catcher, I'm going to take. Strikeout percentage was 30%. Don't like that. But that's one of the reasons why I look at him. And I think no one else is going to like this ugly duck. And if he can cut that strikeout percentage, because there's a lot of room to cut when it's at 30%, all of a sudden you could either have a 260 average, or there could be let's hope he doesn't try to sell it for power, because that's probably going to really hurt. But he could be somebody who could get, 15 stolen bases for you. He's helping you in a weird way for catchers. But anyone who's lost a championship, roto or otherwise, because you tried to do something mid-season, like catch up in steals, would appreciate a Jorge Alfaro more than someone who's never won. Because I know from trying to catch up in a couple leagues this year, steals were something you just could not find unless you were willing to really tank average, really tank, overall playing time, RBIs, runs. So a guy like Alfaro, who could be the starter in Miami next year, or should be, sorry, he could be ready to just like be a catcher. Just, you got to sell on the power. And I am the guy who's willing to go without power from positions if needed.
Well, and Alfaro is one of the guys that I own in the majority of my leagues where I don't have Yachty. So I totally understand that. Now, the piece of the puzzle, they did draft Joe Mack this year to be their guy. So, owning Alfaro is a short-term play. And I will say this, Mattingly has said, Alfaro has kind of screwed up. So he has to win the job back a little bit, because I think with that young pitching staff, they might run Alex Jackson out because he's a better defensive catcher than Alfaro.
They had somebody else at the end of the year who had a pretty good, streaky, but what was his name? I'll find it. I picked him up in a league because I just was that injured come end of the year.
Henry? Nick
I don't know. Forte sounds right.
Yeah, I'm just either way. Moving on. Tom Murphy's a guy that you love. Obviously, your note is literally "I'm a sucker."
Yeah, Nick Fortes, Ty from Miami.
Forte, whatever. It's all the same.
Yeah. Pronunciation is not our forte. Thanks.
Yeah,
thanks.
So Tom Murphy's obviously a power bat only, but with Cal Raleigh there, like this might not be a sure bet anymore. That said, like Cal Raleigh still has a lot to prove. He still hasn't went through the growing pains of a full major league season. So I don't hate this play at all as a breakout guy. I don't know that there's a breakout unless he all of a sudden figures out how to hit for average, because I think it's safe to say the power is going to be there.
Yeah. And Tom Murphy is a better platoon hitter. So this could be the situation where, you want to break in your prospect catcher and you're going to keep Murphy around because, he only had 277 at bats last year. The average, oh my gosh, 202. I think that was career worst for him though. But either way, it's just, it's possible you could get lightning in a bottle with Murphy. And then depending on what is up with Seattle, how things are going, they would absolutely, as we saw this year, they would move out a valuable piece for their team this year if it could get them more controllable players down the road, which means if Tom Murphy, whose stock is obviously way down right now, ends up as like the last guy you pick up on your team and you do have a second catcher to start your year, it's not the worst thing. But you could have him and then it could really pay off because he could end up like a Nola.
I really like him if you have nobody, right? I think that's a good way to look at it. Like if you got nobody, I really like Tom Murphy. Last guy or two guys on the list here, Yoel Pozo in Texas is a depth guy that showed some promise last year. 24-year-old. I'm always a fan of late blooming catchers. Honestly, they've had to see it all. They're almost always better callers of the game because they've had more time to be seasoned. So it usually means they get a fair shake and at bats. Still a lot to prove here. You've got Jonah Heim and Sam Huff there as well in competition. So he's going to have to win this job in Texas. But I do like where Texas is going. They've done a very quiet job of rebuilding that roster.
Yeah, just some talent. And like Pozo was hitting bombs in the minors and then came up and only hit one in 74 at bats, but got a bunch of RBIs, 21 RBIs and 74 at bats. That's great. The average, I think, was 284. High OBP, 380, I think, 370, 378. Yep. So that's cool. And he'll be a prospect for next year. And he was not owned in a couple of our 30-team dynasty leagues. So I remember talking about him in season, and then seeing him come up shortly after he was mentioned. So there's a target for the offseason, maybe just your offseason draft if he's not owned and depending on how your settings are. But last guy up is Tyler Stevenson. He was 289th in points scoring, which is something we're going to try to work a little bit more in discussing, because with points, it is hard to get value from players depending on point per game or point per start for pitchers, but it's an easier way to have a conversation about a player. You could say that they are ranked, say the 25th ranked catcher, but it's also a good thing to say that they accumulated this many points. If they accumulated 300 points and the top player at that position accumulated 500, it makes more sense. And Tyler Stevenson was in a clump in the 289th overall with 6 other catchers within 10 spots of him, including Jose Molina. But he's 25 years old, so of that group, he's the youngest. His ceiling's going to be higher because of his age and the fact that Cincinnati is just an offensive team. Now they've got to keep that up. They've got to keep those players. But as we go through this list, you'll hear another name or two that might actually lean in favor of Cincinnati being able to keep it going. So first baseman here, Ty, we've got Connor Joe with Colorado, Bobby Bradley with Cleveland, Bobby Dahlback with Boston, and Loon Diaz with Miami. I know you are not a big fan of the first 3. Connor Joe in 179 at bats landed this year, 285 average, 848 OPS. Not big on the dingers, 8 dingers, but he was able to get a bunch of RBIs and no stolen bases. So depending on your categories, you're going to be hoping that he actually sticks at first base. But I mean, we know that TJ Cron was able to re-sign, and that means Joe's going to be an outfielder. I think left field is where he played primarily last year. That's fine. Colorado's big, right? We know average is easy to come by there. If a guy can't hit for an average in Colorado, yikes, don't leave Colorado. So Connor Joe, I like the idea there. And then if he can move around or play, as the year goes, play some different positions, could really open things up. But what are your thoughts on Bobby Bradley? Have they changed at all? You weren't a fan of him before. I
don't buy on these kind of guys ever. So, him and Dahlback are kind of the same profile. Like I do like a good power bat, but I like a good consistent profile. And neither him or Dahlback is that guy. The left-handed bat is an interesting feature. That's the only thing I will generally be on side with Bradley. Also, massive swagger. So a button undone kind of guy.
Okay, I was gonna say I'm looking at a picture of him right now. It's too small to see, but okay.
Yeah, he's a button undone kind of guy. And I think I'm always for that, as you guys know. But to me, I'll take Dahlback over Bradley. I'll take Connor Joe over Dahlback, and I'll take Loon Diaz over all of them.
That is dying on a hill, everybody.
Well, I really like Loon Diaz this year. I like to buy him in season, though, because I want people to feel like he's a backup, which he's going to start as, and that's when I want to buy him. That's when I'm going to get in on him, because I think he's good. He's progressed a little bit. September, he hit 244 with 5 bombs, so he started to do it and still pretty limited at bats. What did he have in September? He only had come on, MLB.com, freeze the top frame.
Well, that's okay. You look, and I'll say that's why he's on as a breakout candidate, because
Correct.
If it goes the right way, Loon Diaz breaks out next year. Not the only Miami player on this list. Connor Joe's in the exact same position. If the playing time's there, every reason to believe Connor Joe's going to be a top 50 outfielder next year. And that's on a really crappy Colorado team. And then, Bobby Bradley cuts down that 30% strike rate and maybe starts to spend his off season on off speed, then he could put more balls in play. Doesn't need to hit for more power, because in 245 at bats he had 16 bombs. So you double that, give him 550 at bats. he's going to hit 30 bombs, but you don't want it to be with what, a 208 average. You want it to be with a 240 average. That's our floor. But for a breakout guy that can hit 30 plus bombs, there were 50 guys that did it in 19, right? That hit 30 home runs or more. Bobby Bradley will be able to be one of those guys from a younger age. And Bobby Dahlback, who started so bad this year, finished off fine, 26 years old, ended up sitting a little bit through playoffs and things like that. Schwarber got the at-bats. Well, if Schwarber's not back, it's Dahlback's jab. And that's what I want you to think about.
Well, and here's a pro scouting tip right here. So Loon Diaz, first inning. So I'll read you his OPS through the first 5 innings. 452, 488, 0 in the third, which is hard. 673. Okay, that's the first 4 innings. 5th inning, his OPS is 1308, 380, 330, 6th and 7th, but then 1250, 872, and 2,500 in extra innings. So really small sample in extra innings.
2,500.
but the point here,
sounds like a pinch hitter to me, Ty.
Yeah,
it sounds like a pinch hitter.
The point here is that he gets better later in games, which to me suggests he's learning. And with that, I like that as a breakout move and an indicator that he's going, especially with a young guy. I mean, if we're looking at a 35-year-old, it's irrelevant. But when we're talking about whatever he's 23, 24, I like that as a move towards breaking out.
Okay, cool. Let's move. We'll group middle infielders because a lot of these guys play both positions. So we've got Hasson Kim with San Diego, Mike Russo, formerly Tampa Bay, traded recently to Milwaukee, Gavin Lux with the Dodgers, former top prospect, Jazz Chisholm with Miami, once upon a time Arizona Diamondback prospect, Louis Garcia with Washington. Highly touted guy, came up, has not put it together yet. Nick Maton with Philly, kind of out of nowhere guy, got a bit of time last year. He's still going to be prospect eligible. Jose Barrio, same deal with Cincinnati, had a little bit of time in 19, I think it was, or maybe it was 2020, and then a little bit in 2021, still prospect eligible for 2022. And Brendan Rodgers with Colorado. As you can see from just some of the team names here, San Diego, Miami, Washington, Philly, Cincinnati, Colorado, not all teams that are highly competitive, although we do have the Dodgers mixed in and Milwaukee, who both won divisions or had playoff games, I should say, this year. But primarily playing time opportunity here. And for me, Ty, leading it off, I'll say Hasson Kim, 516th overall in points. My God, it sucks. But he was so highly ranked by me and some others. But I'll eat it here. He didn't get solid playing time when he signed with San Diego. I had questions as to why he would pick that location where he's a shortstop and one of the game's best shortstops is there. I mean, obviously he knew about the shoulder from Tatis, right? He had to know. But either way, it's not like it worked out that he got to play 120 games there. But the dynasty value sucks right now. He's not going to be prospect eligible in any of your formats. He can't be buried in the minors. So now you can go and get him. He had really good I shouldn't say really good. He had a high fly ball rate, 40%. He pulls the ball. He just needs to put it together and hit a little bit better. And when he was getting playing time, he was able to do a little bit more, but he never got a streak going. He didn't get really confident over the course of whatever a weekend series or a 4-game series. He didn't have that big time last year where people were like, hey, he's starting to put it together. It was just little chips away. It was a very tough rookie season, which, Ty, you predicted. You said this was not going to go well. It was not the best thing for him. And I am saying now is the time. A breakout is imminent. I haven't had enough to drink to say that, I guess. I'll have another shot. But a breakout could be imminent. Yeah, it's a breakout is sarcastic, but it's something that could be on the table. Mike Russo, obviously, a much lower ceiling. I just feel like that's a good move for him to go to Milwaukee after having a solid 2019, a solid 2020, and then he just didn't get it together last year. And Tampa Bay wasn't going to pay him, didn't want him, and was able to replace him with other guys who are cheaper, right? Because that's Tampa Bay. So he can go to a team that won their division, who wanted him. And we've talked about Castanheira, Arcia, and oh my gosh, who else has played? Luis Urias, another. So guys that have just not been able to put it together. Well, maybe Brousseau can come in there and just help to level that all out, right? They brought in Rowdy Tellez with Dan Vogelbach, like they're bringing in bodies and making it work. So I believe Russo might be able to carve out some time. So what are your thoughts on guys like Lux and Chisholm for next year?
Yeah, I mean, Chisholm's a guy I bought everywhere last season. So, I mean, I was in early on him. Funny enough, I picked up on some things in spring training. To me, it was obvious that it was coming.
Spring training?
Go back and look at when I traded for Jazz Chisholm. I traded everywhere in spring and or the first week of the season.
Do you have him in the home league, or did you have him in the home league?
No, I didn't have him in the home league because I have Seager and Tatis kind of full at the shortstop position. So
interesting.
we're good there. But anyway, I like Chisholm. I think he'll continue to improve. I like him as like a Bo Bichette light, I think is the way I would look at him. Like profile wise, I think very similar. I just think he's not as good a hitter as Bo is. But I think the power profile is similar and the speed profile is similar. So I think you're going to get a lot of Bo at a discount. You're just not going to get the average. I think that's the big thing with Jazz that you got to stay away from. And I like Gavin Lux to be one of the breakouts of this year. I think he's going to be one of the guys that everybody that sold him is going to regret, because I think he's going to have some chances. Like Chris Taylor's not going to be taking at bats from him this year. That's
assuming he's not back, right?
I think somebody's going to pay Chris Taylor for 3 or 4 years. His versatility and
do the Royals thing.
Yeah, I just think he's going to end up in like a Boston. Like I feel like that's an obvious fit at second base.
Not believing in Christian Arroyo. Oh my god.
No, I never have. I've been very blunt about that.
I still have one share from the prospect days.
so yeah, those two guys. I mean, Hasson Kim still to me like strikes out a ton. His average exit velo up and in, which is what I flagged last year, 76. Right, so that's not good. Like that's almost going up there with a pool.
Those are outs.
To get that exit velo. So I think that's gonna get worse. I'm not excited about it. Yeah, I don't think his swing gets there ever. I think he has to make a complete overhaul, which means we have to go through a couple years of really bad before he's going to get to that point where he can hit major league fastballs up top. That said, on the shortstop side, I mean, Brendan Rodgers is a guy we both kind of like heading into this year. We showed signs of it last year that it was coming. I think he's just a slow learner. I think that's okay. I like those kind of guys, as we've talked about, right? Like team post hype. And I think he's going to be a candidate for that list this year. I just think there's enough tools there. Him and Garrett Hanson, assuming they don't non-tender Hanson,
which is a very strong possibility, which sounds like weird for fantasy baseball people to hear Garrett Hanson might not be a Rocky next year, but $1.9 million for Hanson, who just has not been able to collectively earn time within Colorado as they've dismantled. Now they dismantled, but Trevor Story was there last day of the season, so they didn't sell it off. CJ Cron was still there, and obviously he's back for next year, and that might be the problem.
They'd be better off like keeping him on the roster and trading him. You can get more out of that than the non-tender. Like it's only 1.9. Like, I'm sorry, you're paid $50 million for Arenado to go somewhere else. Pretty sure you can cough up 1.9 and regain some assets.
You paid $50 million for Austin Gomber, baby. Over 12 points per start. I think it was actually
Gomber like those little things from Mario that you jump on? Are those Gombers?
Those are mushrooms.
No. What are they called? They're Goombas. They're Goombas.
Goombas.
Yeah.
Can you say that on podcast?
Goomba? I don't know. Is there something wrong with that?
Hey. Anyway,
Super Mario hasn't been canceled, so I think we can.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Well, there's that movie where nobody likes the Chris Pratt's playing. Anyway, so Luis Garcia with Washington. We've talked about it before. No need to dive in. This is playing time creates his opportunity. 2022, the deck is cleared. This is the time. So if he's going to make it, I don't see why we wouldn't have a breakout, not a 240 season. Think Nico Horner's stat line last year, which yes, he was hurt, but he was playing really well before he got hurt. That's what I'm thinking Luis Garcia could bring to the table. I'm sure we'll talk about him later 5 more times, future episodes. But Nick Maton with Philly, still rookie eligible, as I mentioned before. If Didi's not there, Philly spends money somewhere else. Maton could find himself having an opportunity as early as opening day. It's not it's not guaranteed that they are going to do the like a Matt Duffy signing, right? Like Philly might actually want to give him a shot and then see what happens. But that's where I'm leaning with that one.
I think there's a very real possibility that we see Corey Seager in Philadelphia.
Not if he's in Toronto. Oh, sorry, Corey Seager. I thought you were talking about Kyle.
Yeah, no, gross. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I don't have a major issue with what Maton does offensively as a depth guy. Defensively, but
as a breakout, you're not
liability.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't know that he's going to be the guy they want to come out of camp with. There will be a spot, probably a second though, that he could find himself at.
Yeah, so and that's the thing, right? A lot of these shortstop, second base guys are interchangeable.
Yep.
You know, really.
I like Philly a lot to sign one of the big shortstops, whether it's Seager or one of the other ones. I think they have to try to make a play on that.
They're the right type of market for sure, right? Like,
and Dabrowski has the history of it, right? As a leadership,
absolutely,
like going and getting big guys like this. So now's the time with Harper. You're gonna miss your window if you don't.
Yeah, very true. Somebody who does not want to miss their window with Cincinnati is Jose Barrio. So he needs time next season. And after Cincinnati finally gave a prospect time in giving it to Jonathan India, they were rewarded. He was the rookie of the year in the NL. Congratulations to him. Maybe Barrio could go wire to wire with the Reds. I don't know. But that's what I want to see. The guy is not a quad A player. He's an MLBer and he can crush it in the minors. So I feel like that's just a matter of adjusting. This isn't like the Keston Hira, he bats 3-something with AAA and comes up and bats $170 in MLB. Brio needs to just be an MLB player. And I think that's possible next year. And I think the Reds might put themselves in a position where it's just going to be the only thing they can do. Something that hurts us and hurt us to do. We could only get 3 reasonable potential breakouts at third base. If you know of someone, hit us up at Dingers Pod. Tell us the third baseman you think could be a breakout next year. Here are our 3. Abraham Toro, because, post the trade from Houston to Seattle, he settled in nicely in that infield, and second base or third base, one of those will be his moving forward. Ty France and Evan White are going to have a very interesting spring training as to, what's going on with Evan White, and Ty France clearly did the thing at first base. We've got Alec Baum with Philly, who was 396th overall in points formats last year. I loved him. He hurt me. I'm going to let him back into my heart. I'm going to put him on my rosters. I think you should do the same because there's room for him to improve. And with that Phillies lineup, they've also got guys like, Rhys Hoskins who can hit him in. They've got guys who can just get it done. And I want to see that happen for him next year. Carter Kieboom with Washington, exact same thing as Luis Garcia. We've talked about it a lot. Just opportunity. And now he's going to get it with Washington. And if he doesn't, then that's on Washington, much like some of the Colorado prospects who retired or went to the KBO because of opportunity lost. And Ty's added Ke'Bryan Hayes. If you didn't know, next year should be the year for Ke'Bryan Hayes. It's going to be hard in Pittsburgh because he doesn't have a lot of teammates.
He's a guy that is an all-world talent. He got hurt last year, so everyone's kind of forgetting about him. He hasn't really broken out. He had that really good stretch in 2020 where he's playing great ball, but really still not really broken out yet. So I just a guy that people I think are forgetting about because he's in Pittsburgh. And fun fact, Pittsburgh just does what they do, and they released your boy Phillip Evans here this evening.
Oh, did they really?
He is on the market. So
I wonder if that's age related because I know I forget exactly how it works with arbitration and guys that are when they turn 29, if they're in the minors or something like that, they're able to be released. I think they have the choice, or whatever. But to clear up old Phillip Evans. Now, where will he land? I mean, we know for sure there was some heat going for him after the strong start in 2020 and then the injury. And I even remember recommending somebody paying the piper for him. And I forget what exactly the deal was, but it was like a first or a second round pick in a 30-team league in addition to other pieces. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, that was a lot. But that's the kind of move you make, and sometimes it misses. Right now, a move that I'm going to be looking to make this offseason as we go to the outfield here is a guy like Jorge Mateo, now with Baltimore. One time, or whatever, was with Padres last year as well. You call me a sucker, but playing time mixed with the team not caring about winning, It's what he's walking into. He's 26, and there's potential here with this brief history in Baltimore of 280 average, 330 OBP, and if you extrapolate, which we're going to end up doing when we get into predictions and things long-term rankings, all that stuff, he might only be a 10 to 15 kind of dinger guy, home run guy. Now the AL East is going to help him with some of those ballparks, but 25 stolen bases absolutely on the table for him. And that is one of those things that you can pick up on now, and it's going to really, really help you out if he hits. And what I mean by if he hits, if he's actually successful as an MLB hitter. That is a guy that on this list could be the, I don't know, as good as the top 3 of this list of outfielders, I think, for potential long-term benefit. Before we go to the rest of the list.
What I think one of the other things too with Baltimore, that offense wasn't that bad, especially in the second half. The reason Baltimore was awful is because they're pitching, right? So, they had some offensive guys going. Mancini and Mountcastle are a nice pair.
Santander was hurt, came back and was still fine.
Yep. I mean, you add a Mateo in that, they're not bad. They're not great. They're not going to surprise
Mullins.
Anybody. Yeah. There's lots
Ramon Urias. I'll just slowly mention all the players.
Yeah, but now you're gonna have to go to their
it's gonna get
system because that's it.
Gunnar Henderson.
So
they've got more players.
I do like this pick. I really do. I like this one a lot. Connor Joe back on this list as well, just noting that he's an outfielder.
Yeah.
So next on the list, I like these next 2 guys. To me, they're in a very similar breath. They're very different style of hitters, but kind of same stat lines. Andrew Vaughn in Chicago and Jesus, if you will, Sanchez in Miami. I really like Jesus Sanchez to be one of the breakout guys of the year as well. I like the left-handed stick, like huge power. Andrew Vaughn's a better overall hitter than Jesus, but I think he's going to give you the power and Vaughn's going to give you the OPS. And I think that's the way I'm looking at these 2 guys. So you might see a 285 average from Vaughn potentially at peak, but I think you might see 240 with more home runs from Sanchez. So I do think runs and home runs, I think, are going to be similar. And I think you're going to see Miami creep Sanchez into the middle of the lineup. Vaughn's not going to have that luxury because he's in just a stacked lineup. So that's the only difference for me between those 2. I think that's going to be the big difference.
What do you think of my note here, Ty? And what I've written in is if you have a top 10 or 20 prospect that you aren't sold on, then try to get Vaughn. His numbers after mid-June would have put any team in a better spot down the stretch. I think his average was north of 290 rest of season, mid-June, whatever it was. And he's got room to grow as both a left fielder and first baseman next year, and potential for either one of those to be his long-term home. If you had a top 10 or 20 guy, I don't know who, doesn't matter who the prospect would be, but if you just had one, are you thinking more along the lines of, well, if Andrew Vaughn's stock is down, I'm going to go get him? Or are you thinking he would need to kind of fall to me as a very devalued player?
Yeah, I mean, listen, like if he's got any term on his contract, I'm listening on Andrew Vaughn because Jose Abreu is probably not back in Chicago after this season. I mean, as much as they like him,
Jose,
there,
who did you say?
Abreu.
Abreu. I'm like Barrios.
No, I think he's gone after this year. And there's nothing wrong with Jose Abreu. He's a great player.
No.
I just think when you look at the contracts that this team is going to have to undertake over the next couple of years, I don't think they're going to burn it on Abreu unless they somehow uncover some gems in the starting pitching side. I just think they're going to have to fill the rotation, and it's going to be that or Abreu, and I think it has to be pitching because of the other assets.
Well, and after having their teeth kicked in by Houston, I would like to think that they learned that there's a different way that maybe they need to approach postseason instead of regular season baseball, right? Like some teams they talk about they're built for the postseason, and that's where like veteran pitching and whatever. And I mean, we saw with Houston, they ran out, right? They ran out of gas, and that's why the Braves are the champions.
Yeah.
But
so I do like Andrew Vaughn as a long-term buy. I would spend. There's like prospect wise, there's only a couple that I don't think I would spend to get Vaughn, to be honest.
Yeah, there's a league where there'll be 5 years of Vaughn left, and I've got a top 10 prospect that I'm contemplating sorting out. But the thing is that Vaughn for me would have to be left field eligible. It's one of our 30 team leagues, and he needs to be my left fielder. And my top 10 prospect is a shortstop, and I already have Trey Turner. So it's one of those, like, I'm okay. I feel like I'm okay to make that trade initially. Now,
if
again,
you're talking CJ Abrams, I'm doing that trade all day, every day.
Yeah, it's CJ Abrams for Vaughn, but I would be looking to see if there's a way to get Vaughn plus. So maybe that's a Twitter verse question.
I think that's a great trade. I'm doing that trade either way. Like if I'm the guy with Abrams, I like that move.
But I'm already short up at short, but I also have my first baseman of Pete Alonso.
Yep.
So it's perfect for him for me to get Vaughn, but Vaughn does actually need to be an outfielder for me to make that play. It's not keep forever dynasty, as I said. 5 years of Vaughn, I'd be giving up 6 years of Abrams. But again, I want to win the league.
So I would be getting Vaughn, trading Alonso in a year for your outfielder.
Right.
That's what I'd be doing. I mean, the reality is, like, Benyamin Bailey, Yolbert Sanchez, like, there's lots of depth still coming in Chicago in that outfield. There's no way Vaughn's in the outfield, and there's no way they re-sign Abreu. So to me, I think you have that move, and people will pay for Alonso.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping here. So we've got Jose Siri to round this list with Houston, Nelson Velasquez with the Cubs, Akil Baddoo with Detroit, and Joe Adell. So Ty, of these guys, we talked about Siri a bit in season with Houston. We'll get into him more, I think, as this offseason goes, but absolutely target him. Absolutely target him. Even though he only got to come up in September, he was lights out in AAA, and he's ready. So certainly target him. Nelson Velasquez, light tower power, but slow to develop, and people are forgetting about him, is Ty's note on him. And Akil Baddoo, Rule 5 guy. However, we did talk about him in, I think, the September wrap-up or whatever it was, where we said he's got the perfect stat line to go and get him. None of his numbers are rounded up to like the 15 or the 20, where you can think, hey, this is possible for next year. But it is, he could easily be, I think it was like a 20 to 25 home run guy, 15 to 20 stolen base guy. And as Detroit improves, which Ty, they already have begun by signing a starting pitcher. But if they continue to do these things, it's only going to help somebody like Akil Baddoo, assuming that playing time is there a little bit more in 2022. And then talk about him. Talk about your boy.
Well, I mean, Joe Adell is just, for me, is a guy that just grinds it out. Had good at-bats last year, and he's learning how to hit at the major league level. And not hit for power, which is what everybody wants. He's going to do that. I think very similar to Vaughn. I think he's going to have a little bit of a slower learning curve. And that's why I like him as a breakout guy. Because I think buying early, very similar to what I talked about with Loon Diaz, he's going to be fourth in that outfield with a healthy Trout on day one. So I think that's where he's starting from. But I do think he takes over, and I think jumps Brandon Marsh by the middle of the season. He's just a better hitter, and I really like the hit tool, and I don't think people are liking the hit tool yet. And so that's the thing I'm looking for, is that extra little growth, and I think it's going to be there this year because we've seen progression through the last couple of years in the minors, and I think we're going to see that. And just really quick back on Nelson Velasquez. Led the Arizona Fall League in at-bats, plate appearances, and had 17 walks in 89 at-bats.
Beautiful. With
9 home runs to lead the league in home runs. OPS of 1223. So very, like, a power guy that has very little in front of him in Chicago, right? He is going to be a candidate to open in Chicago. Whether they do it or not and they play the suppression thing, a lot's going to happen in this offseason with CBA, but we'll see. But I like him to get a lot of at-bats this year in Chicago.
All right, so we'll now move to the pitching side. So I'm gonna throw the names out there, and then we'll just go back. So Patrick Sandoval with the Angels, we talked about him. He finished the year injured. Bailey Ober with Minnesota got 20 starts, finished the year injured. Tristan McKenzie with Cleveland finished the year ruining my fantasy season. Drew Rasmussen with Tampa Bay kind of sort of ran out of gas a little bit, but also started in the playoffs. Nestor Cortez with the Yankees, 12 points per game in limited action. I forget if it was 11 starts, 12 starts he had, something like that. Casey Mize with Detroit, Logan Gilbert with Seattle, John Gray with Colorado. Yeah, maybe John Gray has kind of had a breakout before, but there's since been horrific regression. Ranked 201st last year in points. That sounds high. That's where he finished. That's what's up with points leagues. But free agent right now. Chris Bubik, who in our whatever the episode was, that's the guy that I said could be the big breakout guy. And then Garrett Whitlock, who I just penciled him in here, Ty, because we were talking about him before, but I think it's safe to say that the possibility exists very strongly that Boston's going to let him stretch it out in spring training and see if they can make him a starter. Now, this might mean he starts the year in AAA. I don't know. It could. They're allowed, right? They had him for the Rule 5. They had him for the full year. They could do it if they wanted to just make sure it's going to be okay. But, man, he was good. Wire to wire last year.
Very vulnerable in the last, 4 weeks. It definitely was noticeable that people were starting to figure him out. They were using him a little less down the stretch, and they used him only when they had to in the playoffs. So, I mean, to me, I think he needs a little more seasoning. Stuff's there. He's a major league pitcher. There's no questions about that.
Yeah, it was 100 Ks, 71 innings, something like that. I'll look it up here to make sure.
He was really dominant in the first 60% of the season, and then it kind of started to come back down to earth a little bit. But I mean, like I said, he's an SP4 for me, SP5 maybe moving forward. But again, he was cheap. If you got him last year when we told you to get him, he was very cheap.
Yeah, and so correction, 73 and a third innings, 81 Ks. My apologies. It was the ERA that was great, 196 ERA. Oh, man, that's good. 17 save holds.
Real bad in the last half, too. It was a lot lower.
Well, 17 save holds and 8 wins, 4 losses. The thing I wanted to say about Whitlock is the pedigrees as a starter developed that way through the Yankees organization, came over, and obviously through the Rule 5, as we know. Those guys usually just get pushed into the bullpen. And he was great. But early on, to your point, Ty, I remember him having a points per game somewhere close to 5.5, 6 points in my 1 points league. And I was like, man, what a steal this guy is. Drafted him like I do every year. Draft a couple of Rule 5 guys with my final few picks in my prospect draft, because it's always good to have some guys on the cusp, and you can take your project J2s and, your high school drafted guys. And we get into that in the offseason where you got to know what you're doing with your minor league system. You can't just go draft the best available player, or you're never going to be able to win. But Whitlock was one of the guys I picked up and worked out great for me. And down the stretch, I also had Adam Ottavino, who promptly, gave me a couple of those late in the year with some blown saves. So Boston wasn't doing me favors. But this was also at the same time where they were the team not surging into the playoffs. And then look what they did when they got there.
Yeah, definitely. The guy on this list that I think a lot of people have taken a turn on is Casey Mize. I think he's the guy that people have soured on. This guy can absolutely deliver here. And I mean, if you look at his heat maps and where his pitch locations are, you'll see the pitches are up. This is a development thing. That's going to be refined. He'll be a lot better because the velo is there. The splitter's excellent. The slider he can locate, and he just pounded the zone last year. So I really believe that he's a guy that will have a large breakout this year. And I think is one of the guys that if you don't buy him this offseason, I think you're going to miss out on the ability. I think on the pitching side, one of the major steps forward will be Casey Mize this year for me.
This is an honest question, because I just don't know. Was he a high K guy in the minors or college at all? Because last year in 150 and a third innings, he had 118 Ks. Now, 7 wins on a crummy Detroit team to 9 losses. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we saw a ton of Blue Jays who couldn't get double-digit wins when the Jays were, just under a 500 team. But everything else is good. He had 12 quality starts and an ERA 371, which is good. And I mean, his inaugural season 2020, the stat line was terrible, 699. That's Jose Barrios numbers right there. But he had better K rate.
9. Yeah, he's basically K per 9. 106 and 109 in 2019 in overall, 76 in 78 at AA. So
so absolutely that should go up
100%.
as he continues. Okay, that
And
was
it's
the
all,
question
for me,
that I
it's
had.
location based, and that's why I'm talking about the heat maps. As much as I like the heat maps in general, I also think it's really an important piece for him because he's a splitter guy. Like that splitter slider fastball combo has to be down, and it wasn't last year. So I think that's a really easy thing for a pitching coach to adjust, is to get him to lower that trajectory, unless you're Chris Paddock's pitching coach. But you know, it's I think that's an easy fix for Mize, and this is ace stuff here once that's figured out.
Well, speaking of ace stuff, I have been trying to avoid the Seattle guys, but you put Logan Gilbert on the list. That means we can talk about him. In 119 and a third innings, he had 128 Ks. So that K per 9 questions out the window that I had with Mize. When we move it to Gilbert, we know it's there. 6-5 record. Again, Seattle surged down the end, but they had a rough May, and I can't remember if he came up in June. I think it must have been June he came up, and then just started every 5th day after that. 4.68 ERA. That's pretty standard for the rookie, learning the league. You got some good teams in your division, right? Houston, you had the Angels, who were okay and then fell off. And then you had Oakland, who was right there with Seattle into September that you're playing against, and 6 quality starts for him. So I think Logan Gilbert, of this list, of all these dudes here, to me, it's Logan Gilbert and Tristan McKenzie, who are the ones who have the ability to really step it up. And Tristan McKenzie, 2 years in a row, seems to have fatigued the final, like I guess in 2020, we'll say it was September. And then in 2021, Tristan McKenzie, the last 2 weeks, which might mean come next year, Tristan McKenzie is just going to wire to wire it. And maybe, okay, I'll say it. Tristan McKenzie is my pick on this list, outside of Bubic, who I already have, supplanted, or sorry, I've already planted him there. I'm not going to supplant him, right? Yeah, I do. I'm not going to plant. I'm not a gardener. Logan Gilbert will be the second of the guys. He'll be behind McKenzie. So we're going to say Bubic, McKenzie, Gilbert, and I'm just going to drink more beer and let Ty talk.
Yeah, for me, it's for sure Gilbert number 1 for me for next season. But moving beyond that, it's Mize, then Gilbert.
Okay.
And I have McKenzie probably out of baseball by the time we get to year 3.
Oh, man.
His whole body's going to break down.
So that'll be when Patrick Sandoval's got his second Cy Young then. But Patrick Sandoval, just don't forget him. I did have Jose Suarez.
You sound like JP Ricciardi right now, just saying.
Oh, wow, that's dangerous. To any well, is he still with the Mets? No, he must not be with the Mets anymore.
He's somebody's special assistant somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe he's in Atlanta. Geez, who knows? But Patrick Sandoval, Jose Suarez, like Atlanta, the Angels have options, which is great. We know about Ohtani. They've now added Thor 1 year, a little bit more than the qualifying offer for him. So we know they've got at least 4 guys ready to roll. And of course, there's more guys in that rotation, but opportunity for a lot of these players is readily available. If I'm picking a couple guys that I'm not sure about, as far as like you're going to get to start next year, Garrett Whitlock is first on that list, because they could very easily do the AAA thing, as I mentioned. They could also just say, we're going to go back in the bullpen and then look to stretch you out. We saw it happen with Marco Estrada, different situation, but we've already seen it. Drew Rasmussen would be the other guy where they kind of dink him around and move him where it best fits Tampa Bay. However, as we talked about in season, there's reason to believe that he can be an effective player. And Nestor Cortez might just not get the opportunity. We thought Devi Garcia was going to be SP5 with the Yankees last year, and he got 2 spot starts. I mean, he wasn't pitching well before then. But
I do think the book is out on Cortez. Like, I know he's a guy that everyone likes to get some innings next year. Mm-hmm. I think that's
26 years old.
Short-lived. I think he's a bullpen arm. I think he could play I like him as a mid reliever, like that 5-out guy. That's what I think Cortez could be really good at. I think the book's out on him as a starter. We saw it down the stretch, and I just think the time's up.
Okay. I like Michael King too, but I just feel like with New York, it just seems like, he got hurt as well, but it just seems like it's not going to happen. So,
but Michael King in Pittsburgh, because he'll get to pitch.
If I could just move the players I like to Pittsburgh, if I could move them to Colorado is another good home now, not for my pitchers, but if I could just throw 4 different teams out there that I could put players with, I'd be happy. So RPs, we have prepped an episode to break down what happened last year with the RPs as far as like who was getting the saves, K leaders, innings, appearances, all that is ready to roll. So for this part, as far as breakouts, it's really, really hard to predict who's going to break out because Paul Sewald did with Seattle last year, but he also could again next year because he didn't get to be the closer with Seattle. He got 11 saves, but that's the end of season. Paul Sewald had 11 saves. I think the leader in MLB was 39 last year. That's a breakout, right? 11 saves isn't a breakout. 30 plus saves, that's your breakout guy. And he's not at all going to be lined up as the closer when the year starts, because they will have oh man, who's the Blue Jay that signed the 2-year deal, recovered last year, and he's Ken Giles. Thank you. Ken Giles is there. They've got Diego Castillo, Andre Munoz, as Ty is also pointing in. So this is a loaded pen, but that's what's so cool about this is that there are guys there who will make it a good bullpen. And if you're curious, if you're not sure how to win in MLB, how to win in fantasy baseball, it is a stacked bullpen. It does not have to be all closers in fantasy baseball, just so we're clear. You need guys that can get it done and protect you, just like MLB teams do. They stack their bullpen in the offseason with guys who have tools. Then in season, they tweak it. Then trade deadline, they stock up. We saw it with the Yankees. We've seen it with, I don't know, name your World Series team. We've seen them do it, Atlanta. That's just how you win. And Seattle has the bullpen to start next year. So it might seem like Paul Sewald's not going to be able to repeat, but the ratios are there that if he's able to just, keep rolling, he should end up being their closer pretty early in the year. Or they do one of those weird crummy things where 4 guys are getting closes. And then, what are you going to do with that? So there are other guys. Ty, who are the 2 that you like here?
Yeah, Jordan Hicks is a guy that everyone should know. High velo guy, got hurt. We haven't seen him in a little bit. There's been lots of talk in St. Louis about Alex Reyes going back into the rotation. So I do think.
Well, he blew enough saves, right?
Yeah, the stuff's there. The location is always going to be Reyes's thing. So if they feel like they can tweak that, his stuff plays as a starter. It's all about walks for him. But Hicks is a guy that obviously is a dominant late inning guy. I like him as a bounce back, and he never really broke out because he didn't stay healthy long enough, but I do like that move. The other guy is my boy Hans Kraus in Philadelphia. He's going to be a staple of that bullpen. There's a chance long-term he moves into the rotation. I really like him to fill a very similar role that we saw with Garrett Whitlock in Boston, that 1.1, 1.2 innings kind of scenario.
Yeah. Take out the dangerous situation, defuse that, and then move on, which for a bad guy who I believe you named Hans Kraus as like one of the all-time best baseball names or baseball villain names, whatever it was a couple years ago. Like for him to come in and like put out the fire and then get a clean inning after that, I'm with you there. That's the starter pedigree when the MLB team needs the bullpen help, which Philly, not at all known for having bullpen issues. They've always been just a steady Eddie.
Well, and he got a lot of innings in the Arizona Fall League. So to me, I'm guessing they were testing out some pitch changes, 13.5 K per 9 in the Fall League. So again, keep in mind the Fall League is against almost major league ready guys pretty much across the board. So, he's getting, high leverage innings. He started 4 of 4 games. So I don't know if that was just opener or what they used him for, but there was clearly some intent for him being there as a guy that saw major league innings. So they're working and tinkering with something. And at the very least, they're stretching his inning count. So that means Philly believes in him. They acquired him for a reason. They gave up Spencer Howard to have him included. Notice how Spencer Howard's not on this list. Just saying. But
it's a long off season. I need to do more research.
I know, but I like him as a reliever. I'm not acquiring Kraus right now as a starter. I am acquiring him as a reliever with the hopes that he's valued later as a starter.
That's very fair. And your point talking about the fall league, I think that might actually be something that listeners are interested in, because from that we've seen, what was it? It's not first pitch. Was it first pitch? Whatever it was, where a whole bunch of fantasy baseball guys got together in a room. We know Woody was there in Arizona and, got to see some baseball and meet and commiserate and things like that. There's a lot of action that comes out of that, and teams weight things differently. A couple years ago, we saw Ivan Herrera, catcher with St. Louis, go up, and everyone's like, oh, wow, Ivan Herrera. And like, boom, he shot up all the rankings. Ivan Herrera has still yet to make a major league appearance. So you have to weigh that and watch out what everybody comes back with. Because when people get eyes on a prospect for the first time, they might be blown away at it, but it might be because they just want to be blown away, because all of these guys are really good. So if you're just, sunny side up, you're seeing the good in everyone. That's not necessarily the best way to evaluate the prospects in the AZL or the Arizona Fall League. Sorry. AZL is a different league, but maybe, Ty, we should break down some of the stats, results, and where those guys are within their organizations. If Twitterverse is interested, if you as the listener are interested, again, please go to Dingers Pod on Twitter and let us know. Say, I want to know about the Fall League. I want to know about relief pitchers, because I find the relief pitcher stuff I'm looking at right now, I can click my mouse and I can look at it. It's interesting when you look at a good relief pitcher versus a closer specific conversation. There's something to be had for it. And especially when you talk about points leagues, you can completely reshape. If your league is salary based, you can completely reshape how you dedicate salary in that league and really, really, really minimize your spending on relief pitchers, but also be right up there in like some of the best point per game guys. It's just a matter of how often are they pitching, things like that. It's conversation for another day. But anyway, Ty, I think we've given enough breakout candidates for people to tell us who we missed on efficiently.
Agreed. Well, and I mean, come back to this list later when you want to know where we hit on it. It's a great way to learn from projections and mistakes, and you'll see this throughout the rest of the offseason. For many of the lists that we like to dump on, that are just there to get you to click on their ad and buy their affiliate links. That's not what we do here. We're trying to teach you how to be smart people, and that's a great spot to leave it. Until next time, it's been Tyler and Rob here on